What does it mean when President Traoré is criticized by a powerful man in Washington? When one black man stands before another black man halfway around the world, and the accusations are made, who is the traitor? This is not simply a confrontation between two individuals, or even two nations. It is a battle over power, over who has the right to decide dignity and truth. In this story, Traoré does not just stand up for himself. He reclaims his voice, and with the resilience of a man who has suffered too much, he speaks out, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all the forgotten voices on the continent. He becomes a symbol of a new Africa, and for the first time, the world looks up. If you believe in that voice, sign up and join us. This story has just begun. April 3, 2025. Deep inside the chambers of the U.S. Senate, a hearing unfolds that is anything but routine. Cameras are rolling, the air thick with tension. Men and women in sharp suits fill every seat, their eyes fixed on the stage where General Michael Langley, head of U.S. Africa Command, takes center spotlight. A man hardened by decades of military strategy and diplomatic battles, Langley is no stranger to high-stakes moments. But today, the script has changed. Opposite him, not physically present, but haunting the room through the glow of a digital screen, is a name that has rippled across capitals and corridors of power. Worldwide, IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, President of Burkina Faso. Young, defiant, and unyielding, Traoré's absence is felt more powerfully than any presence. His voice cuts through the silence, a calm yet resolute force that commands attention. This is no ordinary hearing. It is a collision of worlds, of old power structures facing an emerging force refusing to conform. As Langley outlines fears of instability and threats coming from Traoré's government, a deeper story unfolds, one about sovereignty, dignity, and the right to define one's own destiny. Before the session concludes, a message will be delivered not just to the Senate chamber or the American public, but to history itself, a declaration that challenges assumptions, disrupts narratives, and heralds the voice of a new Africa rising from the shadows. This is the moment when silence breaks and the world can no longer look away. As General Langley's pointed accusations echoed through the Senate chamber, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. His words painted a grim picture: Burkina Faso under Traoré, a destabilizing force, a threat to regional security, a rogue state rejecting international norms. Yet, the real story was just beginning to unfold. Suddenly, the room fell silent as the screen flickered, and IBRAHIM TRAORÉ's voice filled the space not with anger, but with quiet authority. "I am not here to ask for permission," he declared, his tone steady and unwavering. "Burkina Faso's sovereignty is not a negotiation. It is our birthright." His words rippled through the room like a shockwave. Some senators exchanged uneasy glances. Others sat motionless, absorbing the unexpected defiance. Traoré spoke of centuries of exploitation and broken promises, of a continent rich in resources yet shackled by external control. He challenged the narrative that Africa needed saving by outside powers, insisting instead on a future built by Africans. For Africans, this is not rebellion, he continued, but resurrection, a reclaiming of dignity stolen by colonialism and sustained by continued interference. The hearing, meant to isolate him, only amplified his message. Behind the polished suits and formal protocol, a new kind of dialogue was emerging, one where Traoré refused to be framed as a villain. He was not a disruptor, but a herald of change. As his voice faded, a palpable shift settled over the chamber. The world had witnessed a president who spoke not just for his country, but for an entire continent awakening from silence. And the question lingered: who was truly betraying whom? As IBRAHIM TRAORÉ's voice echoed through the Senate chamber, the room's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The faces of senators, military officials, and diplomats revealed a mix of surprise, discomfort, and contemplation. Some frowned, grappling with the bluntness of his message, while others exchanged whispered remarks, visibly unsettled by the unexpected defiance from a young African leader. General Langley's expression tightened, his earlier confidence now challenged by Traoré's calm yet firm rebuttal. The contrast was stark. Langley spoke of security risks, instability, and the need for Western oversight, Traoré answered with unwavering pride in sovereignty, dignity, and self-determination, where Langley's tone was cautious and guarded. Traoré's was resolute and hopeful. "This is not a negotiation of convenience," Traoré declared, his voice steady. "It is a claim to our future free from external dictates and paternalism." Several senators nodded subtly, recognizing the deeper truth beneath the controversy. Others remained skeptical. But even the harshest critics could not deny the power of his words. Beyond the chamber walls, the impact rippled swiftly. Traoré's declaration was not merely a political statement. It was a challenge to the status quo, a call for a new chapter in African leadership. He spoke not as a rebel, but as a visionary, a political analyst later noted. He captured the frustration of generations and turned it into a hopeful anthem, said a journalist covering the hearing. Traoré's message resonated far beyond the Senate, marking a moment when an African voice refused to be silenced or defined by foreign powers. His words were a beacon of independence, a spark for a continent yearning to reclaim its narrative. Immediately after President Ibrahim Traoré's speech at the hearing, the storm quickly spread around the world. International television stations simultaneously reported the shocking headline, "An African President Challenges Western Power." Videos were broadcast across social media, attracting millions of views and comments. In Washington, emergency meetings of the International Monetary Fund, NATO, and many Western governments were taking place continuously. Western leaders expressed deep concern at Traoré's confident and resolute statement, a message they could not ignore. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, images of people pouring into the streets to celebrate were broadcast live on television. The crowd chanted, "We are back," their eyes shining with hope and pride. People who had been dissatisfied with outside interference and imposition now saw in Traoré a leader who truly represented their voice. Political experts say this could be the beginning of a new era in international relations, when Africa is no longer a playground for foreign powers, but an active and independent force. Traoré's speech is not simply a political statement, but a call to arms, awakening the desire for freedom and dignity of hundreds of millions of people. On the Black Continent, just days after the stirring Senate hearing, Burkina Faso's presidential palace issued a statement that sent shockwaves around the world. President Ibrahim Traoré announced the creation of the Pan-African Sovereign Pact, a bold, independent coalition designed to reshape the continent's financial, security, and resource landscape outside of Western influence. Details were sparse. The member nations remained undisclosed, cloaked in secrecy to protect their collective strength and strategic advantage. But the message was clear. Africa was stepping onto a new stage, no longer willing to be tethered to outdated alliances that had long compromised its autonomy. The announcement ignited urgent responses from global powers. The International Monetary Fund convened emergency meetings to assess the potential economic repercussions. NATO and Western governments rapidly coordinated diplomatic strategies to contain what they saw as a challenge to the established world order. Meanwhile, across Africa, the response was electric. Citizens and leaders alike celebrated the vision Traoré articulated, a union built not on dependency, but on shared sovereignty and mutual respect. Social media buzzed with hashtags echoing themes of freedom, pride, and unity. The idea of a Pan-African alliance that could control its own destiny sparked hope and excitement in millions. Experts weighed in, some cautiously optimistic, others skeptical, but all acknowledging the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just politics, it was a declaration of independence in a new era, an assertion that Africa's future would be determined by Africans themselves. As the world watched closely, the question lingered: was this the dawn of a new global order, one where Africa finally reclaimed its place on its own terms? The streets of Ouagadougou were alive with celebration. Word of the Pan-African Sovereign Pact had spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of hope that surged through Burkina Faso and beyond. Crowds gathered in squares, waving flags and chanting slogans that echoed the renewed spirit of independence and unity. The long shadows of past struggles seemed to lift as people embraced a future they believed was finally theirs to shape. At the heart of this movement stood President Ibrahim Traoré, As dusk fell, he appeared on the balcony of the presidential palace, the city's lights twinkling beneath him like stars answering his call. Raising his hand in a steady salute, he looked out over thousands of faces, men, women, and children, eyes shining with tears and determination. "We have taken back our voice," Traoré proclaimed, his voice carrying over the crowd. "This is not just Burkina Faso's victory. It is the dawn of a new era for all of Africa. Together, we will write our own story, guard our resources, and defend our dignity." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices merging into a chorus of hope and resilience. It was a moment of profound connection, a leader and his people united by shared dreams and a common purpose. International news outlets broadcast the scene worldwide, framing it as more than a local celebration. "A new world order may have just begun in West Africa," declared a leading global news anchor, capturing the significance of the day. For many, the Pan-African Sovereign Pact symbolized a break from the chains of dependency and the reclaiming of sovereignty long denied. It was a declaration that Africa's future would no longer be shaped by external powers, but by the continent's own leaders and people. As night deepened, the streets remained vibrant with celebration, but beneath the jubilation lay a quiet determination, a recognition that the journey ahead would be challenging. Yet with Traoré's steady leadership and the unity of millions behind him, hope burned brighter than ever. The story of Ibrahim Traoré and the Pan-African Sovereign Pact is more than a political saga. It is a powerful lesson in courage, vision, and the unyielding quest for self-determination. It teaches us that true leadership is not about yielding to external pressures or playing by the old rules, but about daring to imagine a new path, grounded in dignity and the will of the people. Traoré's bold stance reminds us that sovereignty is not a gift to be begged for, but a right to be claimed. His vision for a united Africa, free from foreign interference, reflects a deep understanding that true progress arises when a people govern themselves with respect and pride. Moreover, this story challenges us to look beyond the headlines and see the human spirit behind the politics, the hopes, fears, and dreams of millions yearning for justice and equality. As viewers, we are invited to consider the power of unity and the strength that emerges when individuals come together to rewrite their destiny. In a world often divided by conflict and control, the Pan-African Sovereign Pact stands as a beacon of hope and a call to action. If this story resonates with you, join us in exploring more stories of leadership, resilience, and change. Together, we can witness how courage shapes history.